Hello and welcome to Radar Radio. I'm Catherine. Hello to my co-hosts Ash
Hi there.
and Joe.
Hello.
We're joined this week by our guest Jo Kendall. She's a freelance journalist with a wealth of experience in the industry, and we can't wait to get stuck in to hear what you have to say. Hi, Jo.
Hiya, and I can't wait to blather on.
Would you be able to start by telling us where your love of music developed from?
Oh wow, well, yeah. I mean, I think we may have had a conversation about the Beatles before, Catherine.
Yes.
But yeah, I grew up with things like the Beatles and sort of my mum and dad love music, and that obviously filters down. They're a little bit old. They're a little bit older than the rest of my friends' parents, so they also brought in things like light classical music and things like that. So that gives you quite an interesting sonic palette if you like it, and I did. I like that, and I like the Beatles, and we also listened to quite a lot of soundtracks and things like disco soundtracks. Saturday Night Fever was very big when I was a kid. So I had this collection to draw from that was really very varied. And one of the first bands that I kind of claimed for my own, apart from glam rock bands, was ABBA. And then, Slade and things like that. Things with guitars. I specifically remember I'd like the sound of a guitar. I liked rock music as a kid. And also pop music and electronica. So, and there was, the charts were a really brilliant, diverse place for me in the 70s and 80s growing up. So that's where it all starts. And I didn't get to start a record collection, until I was about 9 or 10 or whatever, when I had enough pocket money. But I kind of claimed my mum and dad's collection as my own.
Amazing.
And I think that they actually wanted it back, but I sort of dragged it into a room and would just play it to myself. So I got familiar with all the things and got familiar with vinyl and looking at sleeve art and things like, even on classical records, because classical records for many years had really amazing covers too, sometimes quite abstract or just very evocative. If it's something like Russian dances and it's a folk scene, you're going, oh wow, I'm looking at Russia now. So this is all kind of building up to my kind of future experience of wanting to work in record shops and to handle vinyl. So that was sort of a next phase, although it was difficult to get into working in record shops. I don't know if any of you have ever worked in a record shop or wanted to.
I actually owned a record shop, so yeah.
Oh wow, what was it, Catherine?
Yeah, it was literally a vinyl shop with band merchandise, so that was my route into the music industry through extreme admin.
Brilliant. What was the shop called and where was it?
It was called Astra and in Alton, Hampshire.
Oh wow! Oh, that's an absolute dream. It really is. So as soon as I started going into record shops, and mainly it was Woolworths because that was the closest thing to me, I wanted to be around records and music. And I did actually try and go for some jobs at record shops, because at the time big chain was our price. And unfortunately, they wouldn't take me because I was too young. And then as I got a bit older, as I was getting to like 16, 17, they actually wanted graduates, and I didn't go to university. So I felt really bummed out because I wasn't getting a slot at working in a record shop. I really wanted that. And I started working in other shops. I liked working in shops. I liked working in retail. I worked in a shoe shop, and I worked in a place that's now defunct in Goodge Street that was kind of homewares and stuff. It's called the Reject Shop, which obviously sometimes you get picked on for working at the Reject Shop and being a reject. But I kind of felt like that could be an apt description for me. If I'm not getting the places that I want to go straight away. But the good thing about working at the Reject Shop, it was on a cross between Goodge Street and Tottenham Court Road, access to Virgin Megastore. So another huge record shop for me to spend all my wages in, and that's pretty much what I did. So, yeah, I mean, I did a lot of research, just looking at records, ones that I could buy, ones that I couldn't buy, connecting the dots up by looking at the sleeve notes and the credits. And saying, oh, okay, that producer, I recognise that name. They produced such and such a thing, and this label. Oh wow, I was pretty much in love with anything that 4AD did. by the time I was a teenager, and they had brilliant artists that some of them are still around today. So yeah, it starts to piece its context, and like diving in and learning a lot of stuff. There was a lot of secondhand vinyl and things, and might not have really understood exactly what was going on when I was listening to things, but with that access to these things, I'm so pleased I had access to my parents' collection and to record shops and to secondhand vinyl in charity shops, and it all helped to knit together a bit of a history of music for me.
And on top of the listening and I guess the collecting side, have you had much experience in the way of playing any instruments as well?
Well, I was always pretty rubbish at that. I would be very kindly, the schools I was at would try and include me in lessons. So I'd be on recorder and glockenspiel. I was okay at singing, so I was in several choirs and I really enjoyed that as well. And that builds up your repertoire. Weirdly enough, I actually like hymns and I like some religious music as well, because it's something else about music is the experience of being in a community and being together, and religious music clearly is for that purpose, to draw you together. Everyone sings together. If I picked up an instrument, I get really excited and I go, brilliant, I've got a piano, and then I'd put my hands on it and make an awful racket. I remember having a guitar that my cousin had given to me. She wasn't going to play it anymore. Does anyone understand with a guitar the term easy action?
Yes, yeah.
It did not have easy action. It absolutely ripped. It absolutely ripped my fingers to shreds. And I remember my neighbour, my mum and dad, recognised that my neighbour Alan was into the Rolling Stones, so he came round with a Rolling Stones record and tried to get me to play this acoustic guitar to some Rolling Stones stuff. And the next day, I had a big green pussy thumb from the rusty strings on this non-easy action guitar. And of course, when you're younger, you're impatient, and I thought, I'm not going to go near that again because I can't do it. And there are other things that I could do much more easily, such as writing or artwork, or singing along, or I could make things. I was quite arty, so I could make 3D stuff or paint stuff or whatever. So the musical dexterity did elude me for quite a long time, until I started looking at ukulele about 15 years ago. I'm no ace, but I can blast out a bit of Ramones on the ukulele, blitzkrieg bop, three chords, perfect. But I find that actually, as I've got older, my tolerance, my dexterity, and my ability somehow has gotten better. But again, I'm no Jimi Hendrix or anything. But I just feel that with anything, if you're enthusiastic about it, that's a huge part. Then it's doing a bit of practice. Practice is everything with these things, particularly if you're not a natural. I can't get my head around people like Mozart, who or Beethoven or whatever, or child prodigies who can just sort of like, or people who may have, an impairment, like Stevie Wonder, and music flows through them and they can play everything. What is going on there? That is incredible.
So you sort of alluded to the fact that you're a massive music fan and you're sort of trying to find your place in the world. How did that segue into sort of marrying journalism and your love of music?
It's I did okay with English at school, so I knew I could write a little bit, but I didn't know what to do or how to do it. And I was reading some music magazines, such as started with Smash Hits, and then gravitated onto Sounds, and then many years later I'm picking up things like Mojo, and I absolutely adored all the backstories, because I liked all that. I liked lots and lots of old music as well as new music, but I wanted to hear the stories from old music. But I never thought that I'd be able to sort of break into that. I didn't know anybody who worked there or anything like that. It didn't even occur to me to just send something in. But a friend of mine called Johnny Rocket, we were promoters. I stumbled into the promoting world. The first promoting job I had was assisting a guy called Patrick, who I'd met at a gig, who ran the Dome in Tufnell Park. He was the booker at the Dome in Tufnell Park. And working with him, I got to know lots of other promoters, because you don't book every night yourself. You bring other people in. You will know this from running your own venues. You know, you can do a lot on your own, but you've also got lots of people who want to do things too. So I met Johnny Rocket, and Johnny Rocket is a multimedia whiz, and he had a fanzine called The Prisoner, and I didn't even have a computer or anything, but he said, because I was on the dole at the time, and I think computers had been invented. It was about it was sort of like the very early 90s, and he said, "Do you want to review some stuff?" Because I'd get sent records to me because I'd also been a DJ, and I would get sent records, and I'd be like, "Yeah, sure, I can write about some of this stuff." So I'd write stuff out on like A4 sheets of paper and give it to him, and then he and his partner Lisa would type everything up and pop it onto the fanzine, put it in the fanzine. I have to say, if you find any issues of it, it is unsubbed. It has not been sub-edited, and there are some crazy things in there. So it probably wasn't even fact-checked either. So that's the importance of having a really accurate press release for us to take information from. So that was the first time I got to be printed in something, and it was free. Johnny had, again, as well as being a multimedia whiz, and just full of ideas, he also was able to get ads so that the magazine was paid for, and it was free, and we distributed it around London. We did about 10,000, I think, that we just put into record shops and around venues and things. And that was my first taste of being printed. And what I did do, I got slightly emboldened, so I got a copy and I did send it into Mojo. I think the editor at the time was Matt Snow, and I heard nothing back. So I just completely ran away from that situation.
So how did you move into becoming a fully fledged freelance journalist from your first rejection then? Was it a case of working your way through being sort of able to take those rejections and just persevering, or did you get a later break?
Yeah, I didn't think that I was going to be. I had my heart set on Mojo really, and I didn't think I was going to find a home that was as quirky for me. So I carried on doing what I was doing, which was promoting, and I ran I co-ran a club night, a Britpop club night, for a few years called Blow Up, and that was excellent fun, brilliant. But like anything, after a few years, you kind of go, I feel like I'd like to do something else. I'm in my sort of mid to later 20s then, and I'm thinking, what can I do? And I have been sort of writing as part of Blow Up's website, and we have a record label, so I write their press releases and things like that. And then a friend of mine who I used to DJ with, Alison Webster, her friend was the commissioning editor for Kerrang, a lady called Claire Dowse, and Claire had said to Alison, we need someone to cover our editorial assistant who is going on maternity leave. It's going to be sort of, around about the 6 to 9 month cover period. Do you know anyone who might be interested? And she got in touch with me and she said, I don't know if you want to do something different, but this has happened, this opportunity's come up, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to go for that. And weirdly enough, I hadn't read Kerrang at that point, but I was aware of it, and I was aware of how respected it was, and I knew it had rock music in it. I was off slightly away from rock music at that point because I was listening to more sort of psychedelia and 60s and grunge. I'd been working for people like Sub Pop. I worked for them as a part-time worker when the label first started up in the UK, because obviously it'd been going in Seattle for a long time. So that was where I was coming from. So I had an understanding of rock music. And then I looked at Kerrang and I kind of went, actually, this is talking about loads of music I really like as well. Why haven't I been reading that? So I applied for that job and I became the editorial assistant. They took me on. It was Phil Alexander who was the editor at the time. And within 6 months, Phil had moved off and become the editor-in-chief of Mojo. And my time was starting to sort of run out as the editorial assistant, and Sharon, who's the person I was covering, never came back. So I stayed for 9 years. And in between, my next editor was Paul Rees, who then went on to edit Q. We moved around in the building, Mapping House, which is where Mojo, Q, and many other titles are, FHM, things like that. And at one point, I was sat in the 5th floor next to Paul Rees, and Paul couldn't go to a gig. He was going to go and see Live to Experience, and he couldn't go. And he said, Joe can cover it for me because it was meant to be reviewed. And I went, what? And he said, yeah, go on, you can do that. So I went and I covered for my editor I reviewed a show, and then the next thing is that Dave Everly, who is the features editor, asked me if I'd like to do a piece on a Bristol heavy psychedelic band called The Heads, a one-pager. And so I just started doing that. I got very well guided. I didn't do things absolutely brilliantly first off, but hats off to those two for giving me a little bit of insight and a bit of an opportunity. I was still the editorial assistant or the office manager, so I still had to do those duties, but I was able to branch out and look after gig listings when the listings editor was away, and then they paid for me to do a sub-editing course because I liked words and I liked to work with words, and they could tell that I could string a sentence together. So they paid for me to do that. So my journalism became a mix of reportage and data collation and editing other people's work, and also working with programs, layout programs, to fit words onto a page. The magazine was designed, but we still did a little bit of editing on layouts as well. So it exploded, really. That it gives you instant extra skills as well as writing about music. Kerrang was a great place to work for because everyone had a different angle they were coming from with rock music. It was the era where Slipknot and nu metal had just come along. I was just arriving just as Slipknot were arriving too. I wish I'd bought a jumpsuit to fit in with that. And then straight after that, it was garage rock, totally up my street. So there were many, many bands that were coming through Kerrang that were absolutely suited to me. And I had been listening to music like that all my life. So I was able to understand it. And if I was required to write a little bit about it, then that was there as well.
It's funny you should say that. I mean, I remember, I think it must have been about the year 2000 when Slipknot came out, and I only found out about them because we lived in a different world back then, because I read Kerrang every week, and Kerrang kind of caught the genre of music I loved. I was a nu metal kid. I loved Deftones, Korn, etc. And saw this thing about Slipknot. Got tickets to their first ever gig at the Astoria. Had DJ Sid jump off the PA and kicked me square in the face, a little 16-year-old kid. Precious memories for me. But I suppose what I'm leading on to is, obviously we live in quite a different world now. So back then, for me, every week it was getting Kerrang and getting all of my information about what I should be listening to from Kerrang. But nowadays, I guess everyone goes online. How do you see the world having changed?
Yeah, very much so, Joe. Actually, you know what? We've probably got a picture of you being booted in the bonds by Sid. Well, because that was such a that was
I'd love to see that.
That was such an exciting show. That there's a picture where Sid looks like a kind of flying bat in his jumpsuit as he falls from the balcony, or falls from the stage on you. I think Paul Harris might. There was lots of photos from that. Paul Harris might actually have a photo of you getting crushed by the zeitgeist, basically. So that's exciting. Yeah, of course. But weirdly enough, while I was at Kerrang, we were taken into a room. We were owned by EMAP and then Bauer, and we were taken into a room in the early 2000s where it was announced to us that print would die, and we all went, "Oh, that's a shame, since we work for a print magazine." But they were telling us that because they knew that online had started up. NME had a website that they were starting that would become very successful and the sort of leader in its field. They were the first people, NME were the first people to give away an MP3, and it was The Strokes, Last Night. You know, what an epic tune, and what a great giveaway that is. But people had to, I don't know what kind of route people did in order to get that MP3, to download it, and what they would put it on, because I'm just wondering if the iPod had even been invented at that point. I think it had been invented, because I think the iPod was invented about 2001. So we were taken into a room and said, print's dying, so we've got to go digital. And at that point, they put a huge digital department together for all the magazines. And there must have been about 50 or 60 people working in digital. And within about a year, it had gone down to just one editor, a digital editor, because they realised it couldn't be monetised. and this is the problem that we're facing with print journalism. It's really, really, really hard to monetize it. Do any of you subscribe to any digital outlets such as Guardian or New York Times or other music outlets?
Yeah, Guardian, definitely.
Yeah, so I think it's fair for all the stuff that we read. A lot of stuff gets shared. The Guardians work pretty well. I think that they might be doing okay in the monetization stakes. I think the Times have also been able to break even as well. But with music magazines, it's been slightly slower. And as time went on, and I moved away from Kerrang, I joined classic rock, and then prog was launched, which is where I spent the next 11 years. Off and on. And at some point, the portfolio was bought up by a company that then called themselves Team Rock. And Team Rock, rather ambitiously, tried to drive all the readers thinking we're going to combine all these titles, which was classic rock, metal hammer, and prog, put them all together and have a radio station that had no ads on it, which was kind of interesting, shall we say, and try and get the millions of people around the world that are interested in rock music to pay attention. And they did sign up a lot of people, but when they initially signed people up, it was for free, and then they weren't able to convert those signings to even paying £1 a week. Guardian's £5 a month or something, isn't it, Joe? Something like, or Ash?
It's a really small amount of money that I have no problem paying.
Yeah, exactly. So even if we got £1 a week or £1 a month or something from the initial sign-ups, then there would have been a basis there. But it was really difficult once they'd established it, and then they went back to everyone, went back to the people who'd signed up and said, "Oh, we're going to convert you over. We're going to ask you to pay X amount of money," and people just people weren't interested. They'd be getting it for free, because the problem with the internet is you expect things for free, don't you? So online, it's been difficult, but there have been some interesting developments, and it's social media. You can gather a lot of people on social media, and you get a lot of followers and get a lot of likes there, but does it convert to sales? Not really. But I think with a niche, it kind of strengthens the community and the niche, because we're finding that sadly some magazines are having a bit of a hard time at the moment with the current situation. You may have read Planet Rock has closed, and Q looks like it might be sold. Hopefully it won't close, but it might be sold because their sales can't support what's going on right now. We're quite lucky because we're niches, particularly prog. Classic rock, it's a big old genre, but it's still rock these days is a bit of a niche, isn't it? Unfortunately, a metal hammer, strong community, maybe not a huge selling, but enough to keep it going in print terms. So we're still struggling with online. But what we can do with online is breaking news. We can put really cool, interesting, smaller things online that couldn't make it into a magazine. And react to things really quickly. So it's still really, it's difficult. It swings and roundabouts with it. I love going online and I love reading things online, but I don't like reading things on my mobile. I have to read things on the desktop, and that's the problem. Most people are accessing stuff on their mobile. So how do you make that attractive without all the ads and pop-ups and things coming forward? So it's a struggle, it really is.
That's actually why I quite like reading on my phone, because the adverts are less intrusive, and on my desktop, I have quite a strong ad blocker on, but that actually prohibits me from reading a lot of stuff because people won't let me onto their websites unless I get rid of my ad blocker.
Absolutely. If you're trying to read something on, say, Forbes, because sometimes I'm preparing something that might need a little bit of backup, because Forbes, not just for business, it does quite a lot of culture as well, and you can't get to it. I use ad blocker as well. So yeah, I hear you on that. But the websites want you to have the ads because that's how they're making the money.
Yeah, and I totally do understand that. I think for me a happy medium would be somewhere where the ads were just not so intrusive. Like there's a website I really like, which is like all about media, computer games and stuff. But if you do not have your ad blocker on, the whole thing is just barraging you with adverts, and I've got no time for that.
It's really unpleasant, isn't it? Because especially if you're reading something that might be more serious or sensitive, and then you've just got kind of, buy this pet brush suddenly in the middle of it, and then a song starts up or whatever. It's not right, So that it does need some work, some refinement. So yeah, we're still trying to work out how to do it, but we have seen that as an audience gets a little bit older, and I'm talking with respect to probably Mojo and prog and classic rock, maybe Vive la Rock, some of those kind of heritage dealing titles. The audience is a little bit older, and they will also have iPads, and they will look for the digital edition. So the digital edition is also another way that you can monetize and still get a really nice experience. iPads look really brilliant actually with prog on, because the colours are amazing. Everything looks great with a white backlight on it, and and prog is very, very, very readable as well. It's got a really classy font, and the pictures look fantastic as well. So it feels like a nice indulgence. So you can see someone could be really interested in sort of like having it on their iPad and kicking back, and having that as an experience. I'm still very into magazines, and I like to have a magazine, and to sort of because a magazine gets a little bit worn out in my hands. So and I don't want to lose my iPad either, which is highly likely. So yes, I'm a big fan still of the print medium. What we found actually during the pandemic, even though newsagents might be shut, somehow our titles are selling really well through the supermarkets, and there's been an increased demand for some of them. So that's really good. I think it's also because people had unfortunately, have had a bit of time on their hands and they're looking to fill it up. So they're doing it with reading and listening to music and buying music.
Out of interest,
I think
what do you think the
will
future
prevail.
holds?
It gets smaller because I think print is habitual as well. And I grew up with magazines, so I tend to go back to magazines. And there is something satisfying about magazines. So, as you may or may not know, I'm a music journalism lecturer as well, and that's at BIM London, based in Fulham, legendary rock and roll town. And my students, they come in around about sort of the 18, 19 mark. Some of them go up to about 45. We've had some older students too. They're the ones that remember print and read print, and they're educated in habitually buying magazines. And the younger students sometimes have magazines, and sometimes it is something like Kerrang! That keeps them informed, because there'll be more depth in the magazine than there is online anyway. And if you wanted to go back and see something straight away, you go, I'll just turn to page blah and I'll find it there, rather than scrolling through something to look for it, or looking for something in the search bar. So my students, sometimes they are absolutely, of course they want to be music journalists and they want to write for magazines, but they don't know how they're going to make money out of it themselves. And sometimes they're coming up with ideas for free things, and we have to go through it with them about how you're going to make money, how you're going to sustain, how you're going to look after yourself with this. That's our problem solving. And some of them actually are very attuned to PR or other forms where you use writing to make money as well. So that's other routes that we explore with them. I'm looking to them to continue the good work, really, and it might be in print journalism or it might be online. So I'm kind of handing the problem down to them to say, hey, what do you think? What can we do? And we're very lucky with BIM actually. We've got some training wheels. We've got a magazine that we do, a free magazine throughout the campus called LDN, and the college pay for that, so that's really great. And they get a chance to put all the content together and design it and see how a magazine works, but also they're very aware of the budgets. And then we start to go, do we think we can get some advertising in? No one's put themselves forward to be the advertising sales department just yet. I think they're all a little bit scared of it. But this is all sort of like me trying to get them into the mode of, so great, be a journalist, and great, if you want to do your own magazine, let's go for it. But you need to know how much it's going to cost and how you're going to pay for the product, and then how you're going to at least break even, that kind of thing. But niche titles do well because people can't find enough of that in one magazine anywhere else. So say for something like Prog, if we're talking about Bartley James Harvest, or if we're talking about Tesseract or someone like that, where else is anyone going to read about it? It's not going to be Mojo, it's not going to be Q, it's not going to be The Guardian. So they can come to us and they'll invest in us, and we will do a really good job of giving you lots of information on that artist that you love, and that's where print will survive. It's an interesting thing because I was essentially a freelance production editor, production journalist, which means that I look after the deadlines for the magazine, getting the pages designed. Well, I don't design them myself. There's three people. There's the editor, which is Jerry. There'd be myself, a production editor, and then there'd be an art editor as well. Between us, we collate all the copy and the pictures. The art editor does their magic with like whizzing them up into beautiful design pages after Jerry's commissioned them, and then I get everything off on time. I had actually just come out of working for Kerrang, and I was working for Classic Rock, doing some freelance stuff, covering the production and sub there. And Alex Burrows, who was the operations manager, said, we've got this new title coming up. Didn't tell me anything about it. And I'd heard of Jerry Ewing, but I'd never met him, which is unbelievable, seeing as we've been knocking around in the same town for about 400 years, but our paths hadn't actually crossed. And once I saw the music that he was putting in there, because the first issue was about Pink Floyd, initially it was only going to be 4 issues ever, that were going to be spread out over a year, just to see if people liked them. They were specials. And I thought, I love Floyd, because I've been listening to that when I was a teenager. And there were some other things in there, and there was lots of music that I'd never heard of. So I had a foundation, Catherine, and then it just built onto it. And as we dug a bit deeper, we had an issue that had Radiohead in it. We had an issue that was Muse, we had an issue that was Zappa and Beefheart, and some of these things I really dug. And from Kerrang had a bit of a proggy element about it, because we used to do things like the Mars Volta or Cripple Black Phoenix, and of course we did At the Drive-In, and then they became the Mars Volta. So I had a grounding in it, and it just grew and grew. Like when Jerry would say, we're doing something on Roxy Music, I'm like, brilliant, I love Roxy Music. Oh, they're prog, excellent, I'm proggy. So it was actually quite a fortuitous hookup, really.
What would you say has been your favourite discovery since being more involved with prog? Well, I guess you might have a few, but I guess actually let me rephrase that. What's been your favourite discovery in the different progressive movements? So thinking back to more classical stuff from 70s, 80s, and maybe like 90s kind to 2000s, like Dream Theater kind of stuff, and then I guess the more modern contemporary prog like Tesseract and that kind of thing. What's been your favourite from those eras that you've discovered?
Oh, that's really difficult. That is so difficult. I'm going to say that there's 2 things that really stand out or at least 2 things that stand out to me. Again, because of coming from places like Kerrang, but even before that, I was aware of post-rock. So there's a huge post-rock movement burgeoning that also crosses into sort of like doom and more metallic stuff. But I'm getting off the point here, because what I want to say is Rush. Rush was my big discovery. I did not know much about Rush at all until I started working at Prog, and I got to know a lot quite quickly, because they are a huge part of prog. And the interesting thing is, once you get into Rush, you can hear loads of modern bands, like you can with King Crimson. You can hear a lot of modern bands, metallic bands with King Crimson. You can hear a lot of modern bands with Rush. Okay, so I'm listening to Rush and I'm going, oh my God, it's Biffy Clyro. Oh my God, it's A. Things like that. So Rush became this really important cornerstone to a music scene I was already familiar with, but I knew nothing about. Any Rush fans here?
A little bit, yeah. Well, I guess through my father. I'd say they were more of a subconscious influence.
Yeah, well, they've been through many eras. So at the beginning, they're a little bit more sort of almost Led Zeppelin-y, or because of Geddy's high voice, budgy. And then I really like the 80s stuff as well. And if you like the Police as well, you'll like Rush. So there's a lot to get from Rush. There really is. And then moving it forward into more modern era, sort of for the last 10 years, because I really like 60s sounding things, it was an absolute, and folky kind of music, it was an absolute delight to discover a band called Wolf People. Wolf People are a folk influenced sort of heavy rock band-ish from the Bedford area. The drummer, very funky hip hop style drummer, melded to these kind of folky, heavy psychedelic melodies, and absolutely fantastic guitar work. If you like the Groundhogs, then you've got this kind of wild, freaky, distorted, overdriven guitar that harks back a bit to my love of sub pop bands and sort of bands like Mudhoney and things like that. So Wolf People, I am so happy. If I'd never heard any new music coming out of prog ever, and I'd only heard Wolf People, I would have been so happy. Luckily, there's been much more. There's been so much more new music, and I've heard all sorts of people who are coming back. They've changed. They might have been an indie band, and now they've got a proggy element. They're allowed to experiment. Prog kind of gave birth to a bit of a landscape for people to plant little seeds in and grow from. So, but Wolf People were one of the bands I was absolutely blown away with. Jerry was also really blown away with them. They stand the first record, that it's got moments like Jethro Tull and Fairport Convention and all sorts of things, and bit of Floyd and all sorts of things in that first record. They sound like they came out of 1968. They sound like they were on Vertigo Records, perhaps, but it's a new band, and they're born out of a mix of folk and hip hop. Brilliant. This prog is the genre that just keeps giving, really.
Yeah, I think.
So,
Sorry, Catherine. I was just going back to that. I think there's definitely an element of fewer boundaries within the genre, which means people can bring in, like you said, folk elements and hip hop elements and music and instruments from other genres as well, which is means there's usually no shortage for inspiration.
Oh, definitely, absolutely. I mean, there is the prog the prog reader and the prog listener who are quite conservative, unfortunately. They do tend to be a little older, and they do tend to really only like prog that was made in the late 60s up to about 1974, and that's fine because there's a lot to enjoy and they can have that. And there are bands that also sound like that now that are coming out, and they're new bands and they have that sound. Beautiful. But I think the joy of the genre and what is progressive is to push the boundaries, and like you said, use different instruments, use different production techniques, song structures, voices. Probably also metal. Actually, metal has been really, really great for prog, and that's what some of our readers and some of the prog listeners don't like. That's fine. You can't like everything, but metal has been extraordinary. And again, from being at Kerrang, prog metal was a bit of a discovery for me from there. Bands like Opeth and Enslaved, particularly, and much of the extreme metal can just go off in this incredible symphonic direction and still have the edge, still have the anger, because I like a bit of the edge and a bit of the anger. And I have to say thank God for champions like Bill Bailey, who will talk about prog metal and make it make people curious about it, make it feel exciting and cool, because it is exciting and cool, and it is worth investigating, even if you like only Genesis, pastoral Genesis. Go and listen to a little bit of prog metal. There will be some pastoral Genesis-like prog metal. There might be a little bit of a death grunt at some point coming in, but there'll be something there that you could probably wrap your ears around and go, hang on, I quite like that. So yeah, I think metal heads have quite an expansive ear, actually, and are less conservative than people think. It's not all kind of just sort of like windmilling your hair and chugga chugga. There's a lot of progression there too. And you also put progressive metal on. It's something you like, isn't it?
We've got within the parameters of radar. Obviously, progressive is deliberately quite a vague term in some manners, so it allows us to put on quite a variety of different genres within the progressive sphere, which obviously encompasses, as you say, something that can be a bit folky right up to the hard, dirty grunts of metal, because I think generally, as you were saying, the metal fans are quite an accepting and inclusive genre of people, in the sense that they are all interested in the musicianship in general. So they've been very accepting of sort of coming to the festival knowing that they'll discover something. So I think that's a really positive way. And I think Prog Magazine is very good at that sort of thing, of saying, oh, if you like this sort of thing, you might like this. And that's a really nice attitude to see within a publication.
Oh, thanks for that. I think that you hit it on the head as well. It's also for people who are interested in musicianship, and that you don't even have to be a virtuoso. You can be like me, absolutely rubbish at the glockenspiel and the recorder, and look at someone on a 7-string guitar and go, "Oh my God, that is amazing!" And it's not just, there's perceptions about people who are virtuosos that the music might somehow be unemotional or cold or unmelodic, or so sometimes that might happen, but a lot of times you're going to get something that's absolutely extraordinary, and you just got to give it a go, really. But yeah, thanks for being at thankfully for being at Kerrang. My ears were opened up by at least 3 or 4 staff members who have put this incredible progressive metal on the stereo. We played music all day, and to a certain extent we were doing this also at prog, when we can get away with it, because prog is the one genre that everyone argues over in the office as well. It would be like, what are you playing now? Particularly when we're playing the Jethro Tull Christmas album in March. So being at Kerrang and hearing anything from black metal through to trumpet punk, you're going to get an education. You might not like it all, but in 45 minutes that record is going to be over and there'll be something new along, and it might be something that's absolutely up your street. So you've got to keep your ears open, really. And I know I like guitar music, always knew I liked guitar music, but I didn't know it was going to take all the shapes over the next sort of like 35 years of me listening to it that it has. It's been really, really extraordinary, and it just makes me so kind of enthusiastic for the future of guitar music too, and the future of progressive music. But yeah, the future of music, it's guitar music isn't dead. It was declared dead in the early 60s when the Beatles had gone for an audition. It's absolutely it's alive and kicking, and we're all supporting it, aren't we?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair and healthy assessment of it all. One thing that we like asking guests, because we try to interview people in different facets of the music industry, and you're the first journalist that we've spoken to, is, especially with an eye to regarding what you were just saying about the future of the music press, How would you advise somebody in today's generation, and especially as you are teaching the next generation as well, what advice do you give for somebody that is interested in music journalism as a career?
I think that they have got to be writing every day, even if it's a little bit in a journal or something, just putting down scraps of thoughts so they get used to writing and having original thoughts and original ways of describing music that they're hearing. And also if they're going to be doing things like live reviews or whatever, you read a lot. We all read a lot, and we all sort of like absorb what we all sort of absorb what other people have written, and maybe pick up tips and kind of go, "That's a great turn of phrase," or "Wow, that paints a picture. I really feel like I'm in the room with this band." So think about the skill that you'll be putting together by reading other people's work and also doing it yourself, and also history. This is the thing, you need to have things in context. So when you talk about a band or an act and you want to make a reference to something they sound like, it helps to listen to a lot of music, even music that you don't like, because particularly, I've mentioned how I fell in love with Rush, but just as easy I could have gone, oh, they're awful. However, I would have still listened, not to everything, but to a bit of them, so that I would be able to have a qualification in my reference when I say I don't like that band. You don't just slag it off by saying, oh, I don't like that kind of thing. Then someone says, why? And you go, well, I don't really know, I don't listen to it. That's not fair. You've got to just give it a chance. Like I said before, no one expects anyone to like everything. No one can like everything. Some people are broader in their taste than others. Some people are deeper in their taste than others. So, but you do need to listen to it in order to say, why don't you like it? And then also think about, why don't you like it? Why are you having finding it distasteful? And maybe that's an interesting thing that you can then write about and sort of be a piece of source material for something else. You're kind of going, oh, what is it? Is it lyrics? Is it a sound? Is it the production? Is it high voice? Is it, so you start to get deeper and deeper into these things, but it takes time. But that doesn't mean that you can't write straight off when you're like 14, 15, 19 or whatever. A good writer is a good writer. It's very difficult to give people the gift of a flair for storytelling if they're not actually a great writer. However, another thing is, if you're not a really, really brilliant writer, you might be a brilliant communicator on a podcast, or you might be a brilliant vlogger. So if you think that communication is your thing, that's what we're trying to do, is steering you in that kind of direction. So don't give up on the communication and wanting to talk about and champion your favourite music or criticise it. Criticism is very important. It helps things move on. It helps things improve. If you feel that your writing is lacking, you might have some other skill, and you need people like us to help discover that and to put you in the right direction. So that's I would just say, don't give up, but also, if you haven't quite hit your stride in one thing, it might not be the pathway you're quite doing right now. It's not quite the right pathway for you right now. You might be destined for another one, and then see if you can maybe circle back once you've been vlogging or doing a radio show for a while. Maybe your writing might improve after that, if you're going to go back to it. But the journalism isn't just written; it's communication across many platforms. So there's lots of different ways to get your ideas and enthusiasm and communications out there.
And I guess I think the final question for our podcast today will probably be one in regards to the current world situation, but more focused on yourself. So what have you found yourself doing during lockdown, and how have you been coping during being at home in the pandemic? And that's on a professional and on a personal level as well.
I straddle the line between being an extrovert and being a complete hermit. So I've been able to go into hibernation quite successfully. As a freelancer, I work from home quite a lot anyway, so there's nothing I like more than working in my pants every day on the sofa. It's awesome. However, there have been a few less opportunities to do work as things have been sort of like rejigged and people are saving money at certain places that I'm working for. I was still teaching. I had 3 weeks off over the Easter break, and then went into online teaching. We learned how to do that for the last term of BIM, which was extraordinary, really. So I've done all my lectures on Zoom, because I teach various modules to do music journalism, but also teach music production students who are going to be the future music producers. I teach them about the music industry, and so we had to do these the last terms online, and then get them to their exams. Hooray! But I found that all right, actually. It's a bit odd. Catherine and I were involved in something last year where we were in a panel. We were doing a panel about women in prog for YouTube, and I hadn't been filmed in that way before. Well, I hadn't been filmed at all, and it was a bit odd. So, Catherine, I don't know how you felt about that.
I hated it from start to finish, but that was just one of those things. But it was nice talking to you. It was the filming element I didn't like.
It was lovely talking to you, yeah. So the thing is that I'm more than comfortable, as you will be as well, with talking to people when you interview them and you've got your recorder out, fab. Then something like a podcast, that's okay, can cope with that. The moment you are on camera, you become incredibly self-conscious. So teaching could be a bit, but you know what, my students, because we were all supporting each other and we all felt a bit kind of freaked out by everything, we just went, there we are. We're all together in a virtual room again. So that was a really nice thing. So yeah, so I've been doing a little bit of work. I've been teaching. I've been buying a lot of stuff on Discogs. Oh no, I've been listening to a lot more radio, and I love radio. But I've actually been listening to mainly Craig Charles' Funk and Soul show, because I love funk and soul music, and buying quite a lot of things off of Discogs because of that. Then participating in the absolutely amazing Bandcamp fee-free Fridays. What heroes for doing that. For anyone who's missed it so far, Bandcamp, in order to help artists, were waiving their fees. They've done it 3 times now, or they've given donations to Black Lives Matters and so on and so forth. So doing a bit of that as well, and also catching up on a lot of films and a few Netflix things too. And hats off to Netflix and the BBC for putting a load of documentaries up that I'd not seen before, or rerunning things, putting them up for free. Yeah, so it feels like it's been a very, very strange time. I haven't done anything like built a gym and lost £100 and sort of now I can play the sitar. None of that. I don't think anyone really expects anybody to be totally productive during a pandemic. But I have been gently keeping my mind ticking over, which I think has been really important. And also reaching out to friends and people in the industry just to say, hey, how you doing? Are you all right? As well. I think there's been a fair amount of gentle sort of connection and just seeing how people are as well.
Just going back to some of your purchases, was there anything that you bought off Bandcamp that you could recommend?
I have some people who are in the comedy circuit, and I've been buying some comedy. One person is Michael Legg. His latest release is called The Idiot, because he's very, very into Iggy Pop. He's been into Iggy Pop for a long time, but he got really obsessed by Iggy Pop, and he's named one of his shows The Idiot after that. I do recommend that. And my good friends, The Fierce and the Dead. The Fierce and the Dead released some a live album for when they were in the US. That's really great. If you like a mixture of sort of psychedelic prog grunge with post rock and electronica, then The Fierce and the Dead are for you. And the other stuff I've been getting has been sort of obscure, like Turkish psychedelic prog and things like that. and also P.P. Arnold album. That came out. She recorded it in the late 60s and early 70s. P.P. Arnold was one of the Ikettes, and on her album she's got people like Stevie Winwood and Eric Clapton and things, but it never came out. And it's only come out sort of in the last 2 years, and I heard it and I thought I've got to have that because it's that brilliant sort of, she's got such a wonderful soulful take on amazing 60s rock. Like she does a brilliant version of Medicated Goo, which is a Traffic song, and it's so groovy. So those are my recommends really. P.P. Arnold, Fierce and the Dead, and Michael Legg.
Cool, thank you for that.
Thank you. I've noticed some of the documentaries that you've been posting recently. I've been checking out, and because we both like Motown and soul, and they've been fantastic. So thanks. I appreciate your recommendations on those, so I can heartily endorse them as well.
Oh, you're welcome. The Ella Fitzgerald one was so wonderful. And there's just so much more that the BBC have put together. BBC 4 apparently is under threat, and that's one of my favourite channels. I was just a couple of days ago watching the Mark Bolan documentary and Glastonbury. Oh my goodness, Glastonbury! God, they put up so much brilliant stuff from Glastonbury. The Radiohead set was fantastic, but that Bowie set that had never been seen before because he was embarrassed. He had laryngitis that week, and he didn't feel confident that it should all be shown. So he'd negotiated with Mark Cooper, the Glastonbury producer, that they were only going to show 7 songs and then 1 encore, and that was it. And now the whole thing is up there on iPlayer, I think, for a year. So that's really, really, really worth checking out. Really, really, really brilliant. So yeah, but thank you, Catherine, for checking those things out as well. I look at what other people are posting too, and watch what they recommend. And it's good that we're all keeping each other informed, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's been a really nice way to discover some new things, so I appreciate. That's part of the reason that we've been asking all our guests, because some of their recommendations have really hit the nail on the head from previous guests, and so it's always interesting to get quite a wide variety of influences.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And if you've got anything that you want to recommend to me, because at the moment I've just watched the Jeffrey Epstein series, and
So you probably need a break.
I need extremely heavy stuff, and I'm going to dive straight into I May Destroy You. So, happy joy.
Corey Wong released some of his live sets, so I'd recommend those as something to cheer yourself up with, because that does sound like quite heavy watching. So I've been revisiting some of his and Wolfpack's live shows recently, and they've brightened up some days, definitely.
Oh, one of my favourite things to just give me a little fillip online is to watch Wolfpack It Gets Funkier. I think it's part 4, which is absolutely insane. Amazing funk outfit. And what's their offshoot? Fearless Flyers. Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
wow. Great stuff. So yeah, I will definitely check out the Corey Wong, because he had an album out this year as well, didn't he?
Yeah. He's he's released a couple so far, actually, I think.
Yeah.
Productive man.
So yeah. Really, well, these people are like machines, really, aren't they? But yeah, that's a good tip. Thanks, Catherine.
No problem. Well, we'll probably wrap that up for today, mainly because we've probably all got to go and find out some of these recommendations at this point. So thank you very much for speaking to us, Joe. So that would be bye from myself, Catherine. Bye from Ash.
Cheers. Bye, Joe.
And bye from our Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
And thanks to all of you.
Thanks
to all of you for having me on. It's a pleasure. Lovely to chat to you today.
No problem. Bye.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.